The hinge doesn't get colder than 50 below. Not in daylight, but 50 below is enough. I learned that fast my first week on Kesson ground, when a private from 2nd Platoon took one glove to check a radio dial and lost 2 fingers to it before he even felt the burn. Out here the cold doesn't announce itself, it just takes. The moon doesn't spin the way ours does. One face always toward its sun, one always away, and the hinge is the band of twilight running between them, where the light never gets brighter than a late afternoon and never gets darker than dusk. Everything that matters on this moon happens in that band, because it's the only place anyone can survive long enough to fight over anything. We'd been called up after a skirmish along the frost line. Not ours. A border dispute between the Kesson Highland clans and the Vethka coastal raiders, the kind of fight that's been running for 9 generations and shows no sign of stopping. Our mandate was medical support only, no combat role, and most days that meant patching up Kesson soldiers in a tent 40 meters from where the fighting had been an hour before. That morning, the snow was still pink in places. I was working down the line of wounded when I found him, not one of ours, not even one of the Kesson we'd come to treat. A Vethka scout, young by the look of his crest plates, half buried under a fallen comms mast. His leg was broken in 2 places, but that wasn't what was going to kill him. What was going to kill him was that his Ember-Shard had been crushed flat under the mast and on the hinge. That's a death sentence all by itself. I should explain the shard, because everything that happened after only makes sense if you understand it. The Vel seam is the only deposit of warmstone on this entire moon, and it's been fought over since before either side kept written records. Soldier on both sides, Kesson and Vethka, carries one polished piece of it on a cord at the throat. It holds body heat and gives it back slowly, hour after hour. And without one, in the open on the hinge, you have maybe 6 hours before your core temperature drops past the point where anything I carry can bring it back. Losing your shard isn't like losing a canteen. It's like losing your blood. And there's a custom that goes with it. When a Kesson soldier kills a Vethka, or the other way around, the victor takes the dead one's shard. They call it the first spoil. It isn't looting. Not to them, not really. It's older than that. It's proof the war is still a war, that the cold still belongs to whoever's strong enough to keep it. The scout was conscious when I got to him, which surprised me. His breathing was already shallow and wrong, the kind of slow that comes right before a body gives up trying to stay warm on its own. He looked at my uniform, at the patch on my shoulder that meant nothing to him, and he didn't flinch and he didn't beg. He just watched me, the way you watch weather you can't do anything about. I cleared the mast off his leg, splinted it, did what I could for the bleeding. None of it mattered much. His shard was a smear of gray dust in the snow beside him, and I had maybe 20 minutes before the cold finished what the mast had started. I had my own shard. Kesson elders had given it to me 3 weeks earlier, at a welcome ceremony. I'd mostly stood through not understanding. A courtesy gift, the translator told me. For the human medic who'd treat their soldiers without asking which clan they belonged to. One of their artisans had etched my initials into the underside in their script. D and R rendered as 2 interlocking marks, so I'd always know which one was mine. I'd worn it every day since. It had kept 3 separate frostbite cases off my own hands during cold watch shifts. I knew exactly what it was worth. For about 3 seconds I did the math the way anyone would. I was 20 minutes from the aid tent, and walking that distance without a shard, on the hinge, with the wind picking up the way it was, wasn't nothing. I thought about that for the length of one breath. Then I stopped thinking about it, 'cause there wasn't a version of the next 20 minutes that I wanted to live through if I didn't try this first. I took it off and pressed it into the scout's hand, then folded both of his hands around it and held them there with my own. He didn't understand at first. I watched the confusion move across what I could read of his face. The shard was warm, was getting warmer, and it wasn't his, and I was the wrong species to be giving him anything at all. I didn't have the words in his language, and he didn't have mine, so I just kept my hands where they were and let the warmth do the talking. After a while, his breathing evened out. Not fixed. Nothing about his leg was fixed, but the shaking stopped and his eyes stayed open, and some color came back into the gray around his crest plates. I stayed there longer than I should have. Behind me, I knew. The Kessin wounded still needed checking, and I'd have to answer for the time later. But I didn't move, and neither did he. About 15 minutes, only thing that existed on the hinge was one sharp warmstone, passing heat between two hands that had never been meant to share anything. He died anyway. The leg had done more damage than I'd seen, an artery I couldn't reach in time, buried too deep under torn muscle for field hands to find. But he died warm, and he died with his eyes open, looking at something that wasn't the snow. I didn't notice the Kessin officer until afterward. Elder Sergeant Corsavol had been 20 meters away the whole time, finishing triage on his own wounded, and he'd seen the entire thing. The shard come off my neck, the etching catch the light when I turned it over, the 15 minutes I spent kneeling in the snow with an enemy's hands folded around my own. He didn't see anything for a long moment. Then he walked over, knelt across from me, and looked at the scout's hand still loosely closed around the stone. He recognized the etching. Course, he did. Half his clan had been at the ceremony where it was given to me. I expected him to take it back. That's what the custom would have called for, even from his own side. The shard was Kessin gifted, technically still Kessin property, and the dead were the dead regardless of whose uniform they'd worn. I'd seen what happened to enemy shards after a skirmish. I braced for it. Instead, I reached out and closed the scout's fingers more securely around the stone. He said something low, in Kessin, that the translator in my collar rendered a half-second late. Let him keep it. He should go to his own people warm. Then he stood and gave an order to his own soldiers. The first spoil for this one body would not be taken. I learned later that in 9 generations of recorded conflict along the hinge, no Kessin officer had ever given that order for a Vethka dead. Not once. The Vethka recovery patrol that came through that evening found their scout wrapped against the cold, with a shard that didn't belong to either army, etched with 2 letters in a language neither side spoke, still faintly warm. I don't know what they made of it on their side. I know what it did on ours. Within a season, for the first time anyone could remember, both clans agreed to a 4-day truce around the Vel seam. Not peace, nothing so large as that, just 4 days where nobody died over Warmstone. It has held every season since, a little longer each time. I got a new shard, eventually. The artisans etched it the same way, 2 interlocking marks, D and R, cut a little deeper this time, like they wanted to make sure it would outlast the cord. I still wear it. Some nights on the hinge, when the cold comes down hard enough to feel through 3 layers, I think about a Vethka scout I never learned the name of, lying somewhere on the far side of the seam, buried with a piece of warmstone he never knew came off a human's neck. He never found out it was mine. Sure, it would have changed anything for him if he had. But I think about it anyway, on the cold nights, and I find that it helps.